What the hell happened last week? Seriously. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. I'm your host, as always, Clint McLean. This week, the UFC is headed to Rogers Place. That is right, oh, Canada. We are headed to the land of snow and ice. We are headed up to the place where everyone knows nothing but hockey and maple syrup. And this is a stacked card. UFC 240. Man, I am messing up already. It's going to be a long night. Buckle in, ladies and gentlemen. This is a big card. I've got a lot to talk about, and we still have to do a full recap of last week's UFC on ESPN4. So this one is going to be a good one. Let's get it started. First things first, as usual, I've got to remind everybody about the offer that BetOdds Sportsbook, that's betodds.ag, has provided to Die Hard MMA podcast listeners. That is right. If you go and deposit over on betodds.ag, you will get a 100% bonus deposit match from $50 to $500 maximum. They are not offering this deposit match right now, and only for Die Hard MMA podcast listeners. Go ahead and head over there, sign up, deposit FE6EFB. That will get you a 100% bonus match on whatever you deposit from $50 to $500. And just in case you wanted a little extra to sprinkle on the fights this weekend at UFC 240, we got you covered. I want to take this time to say thank you to everybody and throw a couple shout outs here. I want to say a big thank you to my man Kenneth Edwards, my lady Sarah Jackson. I would like to say thank you to my longtime friend Baseball Bob. And I want to give a couple shout outs to a couple of the new followers over on YouTube. We've got Stuntzu, we've got Kim Jason Vega, we've got Ejection, Eric Stevens, Kyle Richmond. We are growing and I freaking love it. But here's something I want to talk to you all about. Over on the Die Hard MMA podcast on YouTube, we have 230 subscribers. First off, thank you all. I appreciate that. Thanks for everybody tuning in. And we hit a benchmark 677 views over on YouTube. We are getting a crap ton of hits. We are getting a crap ton of views and listens over on YouTube. But where is the love? Throw me a sub. Subscribe to the channel. Get that notification every single time I upload a video. Because if 600 of you are listening to the show and I've only got 230 subscribers, something's a little off there. Love you all. Hit me up. Let's get this thing rolling. I am ready to recap UFC on ESPN4. And I am sorry. I should have got a little, kind of a wrap-up event type of breakdown out for you all, and I meant to on Sunday. I had a little bit of stuff go on personally, unfortunately, that I just wasn't able to get it done. I really wanted to because so much happened, so I'm going to do my best to keep this brief, but holy cow, was there a ton that went on that night. So getting us started, holy cow, first and foremost, something was weird last week. You could tell from the very first fight of the night that something was off. And this is mixed martial arts. Part of the reason why we are diehards, part of the reason why we love this sport is because literally anything can happen. But every once in a while, you get one of those nights where it's all just weird. And it seems like everything that can go wrong is gonna go wrong, or everything will just be a little awkward, and it's kind of a vibe in the air that you get. It's been a while, I feel like, since we've had a card like this, but this San Antonio card was definitely one where I had that feeling. So the very first night, we've got Domingo Pilarte, who I think was the biggest favorite on the card, taking on Felipe Corrales, and this is one where I was relatively sure that Pilarte would lock up that submission at some point, but the line was way wide, and Felipe Corrales pulled off the upset. He showed up to fight, and Pilarte just had a massive letdown. I know a bunch of people who took that stab on Corrales, and congratulations to everybody who did, because that was a great cash to start the night off. For us, however, the second fight of the night, Mario Bautista versus Jinsu Sun, busted our parlay right out the gate. Batista showed up, and you know what? I could not have seen that coming. I was really high on Jinsu Sun, and you know what? my guy Quit Strange 775 on YouTube. Right after the podcast came out, he commented that he was a little wary of that pick, and boy was he right. Batista showed up, and Batista was clearly the better man that night. But honestly, I got to tell you, that played right into our strategy as far as saving money goes, because we wanted to play Jinsu Sun, and we wanted to play Big Ben Rothwell. That would have come out to almost 4 units, 3.83 units based on the lines that we could have got at the time of the podcast. Rather than putting that kind of chalk down, rather than laying 4 freaking units on those 2 favorites, we parlayed the 2 of them together and we risked 1 unit to win 1.31 units. Much better risk-reward ratio in my opinion. Both of them shit the bed. So instead of us being down 4 units, we were only down 1. So as much as I'm bummed that the parlay got busted right away, and as much as I'm upset that I had a bad read on those 2 fighters, we definitely minimized our risk. We definitely minimized our losses in those spots, and that's definitely what that strategy is for. Anytime I parlay those mid-level favorites like that, I am squeezing the value out of those spots, and in cases like this where they backfire, I am saving us money. So if you want to look at me and be like, oh, I'm gonna rant here for a second. I had some guy commenting on me, oh, this guy, he was all about Big Ben Rothwell. Oh, he was balls deep in him last time he fought and he lost, and now he parlayed him. What a fucking idiot. Like, this guy was coming after me, and I'm like, you don't get it. Like, you just are too short-sighted to see what I'm doing here. I am picking a fighter who I legitimately think is going to win, and first and foremost, I was wrong, all right? You all know, if you've been listening to the show for a while, I have zero problems telling you when I'm wrong on things, and I was wrong a lot at UFC San Antonio. I was wrong about where Big Ben Rothwell was at. I know he's later in the card, but he was tied into our parlay, so that's why I'm going over him now. But the strategy that I employed, it's not like I was telling everybody to lay 5 units on a parlay because I was so balls deep in Big Ben Rothwell that he just had to win. That was not what was going on here. I was minimizing our risk. I wanted to have a play on Big Ben because I thought he would win. And when you say I'm putting a 1 unit shot on this parlay, essentially I'm putting a half unit on each fighter with a much better payout than their odds are giving us at the time. So whoever you are, you think I'm just going nutso over here parlaying people. That's not what's happening. I'm actually being very smart and intelligent about the way I'm betting it, so I'm not over exposing myself to risk in these kinds of spots. So moving on along, rant over, Ray Borg takes on Gabriel Silva, and wow, first round, it really looked like Gabriel Silva was going to pull the upset, and I was sitting there going, man, I had that sinking feeling like I wanted to bet Silva. I really wanted to take that stab on Silva, but I just didn't have the guts to pull the trigger because I had a bad feeling that Ray Borg was going to show up and he was not going to drop 3 in a row. And then Borg turns around and he poured it on for rounds 2 and 3 and got the decision. Couldn't be happier for him as a person, all the struggles that he's gone through in his life with his son and all that kind of stuff. So happy he got back in the win column, but definitely dodged another bullet there by steering completely clear of that fight. If you want to say that you hit that thing with Ray Borg and it was worth the minus 250 or whatever you laid on him and you were on the right side, I don't agree. He looked like he was going to get messed up, and then he dug deep, and he did manage to get it done, but that's not what I'm looking for when I lay minus 200. So then we head to the bright spot of the night. Jennifer Maia follows my game plan step for step. Perfect. Pitch perfect from bell to bell. She roughed up my girl Roxanne Modafferi, and I'm so sad that I had to watch Roxanne lose. I do not like rooting against her, so it upset me to put money on the other side. But if there was ever a home run read for me, this was it. We put 2 units on Jennifer Maia because I had it called perfectly, and she dominated that fight from start to finish. So sorry for patting my own back, sorry for tooting my own horn, but I have to here because I am the Modafferi whisperer. I know when that girl is going to show up and when there's value on her, and I know when to pull the trigger against her because I know exactly what she is capable of. Now the next fight, Sam Alvey unfortunately did not get it done for us. I took a little bit of heat on this one as well. A lot of people were making fun of me for taking the poke on Sam Alvey, but honestly, he had opportunities to land shots. I know he definitely kind of shit the bed, but Abreu was not the kind of opponent that people thought he was going to be. He did not come out and put on a stellar performance. He did not dominate. He couldn't get Sam Alvey to the ground, where we all knew that was going to be his advantage. Realistically, the fight played out exactly the way that I thought it was going to and wanted it to. Sam just didn't get his big moment. He had lots of shots. He took some swings. There was a chance, he just didn't quite get it done. So honestly, if we're doing our whole hindsight, regret the bet type of thing, I don't regret that one. I think Sam Alvey was perfectly live. I think we got close to the best line. I mean, we got plus 144. He closed at around plus 160. So if you waited till fight time, you could have got a little bit better of a line. But I mean, he stood a chance. He was in there. Now, this is something I do want to talk about, though. Abreu should not have won that thing 30-27 in my opinion. The time when Sam Alvey actually knocked him down, defended the takedown, put him against the cage, and then put him on the mat for a minute, I think he won that round. And that's something that I'm talking about, the weird vibe that happened at UFC San Antonio. I feel like the judges were handing out 30-27s like Oprah. They're like, you get a 30-27, you get a 30-27. Like, everybody gets 30-27s. It felt like they were not judging round by round like you're supposed to. It felt like they were waiting until the fight was over, picking a winner, and then scoring all 3 rounds previously for them. Now, I don't know if that's accurate, but that's really what it felt like, because there were so many 30-27s on what were close, hairy fights. Like, all the way through the night, this kept happening. So we get to pat ourselves on the back again. Rocky Pennington showed up and she got it done. I told you all that she was live and that she shouldn't have been a dog here, with the experience that she has, with the ability that she has, and the shape that she showed up in. There's another one that I just absolutely loved. We nailed our picks on women's MMA for UFC San Antonio, and I try to be very, very careful with my women's MMA picks because there's so much volatility with how new the sport is. I feel like I get a better read on men, but every once in a while the stars align for me, and I just feel like I know exactly what's going to happen with some of these women's fights, and we were spot on here, and that's what makes the story of UFC San Antonio so heartbreaking for me, because we started so hot. We cashed our double bet on Maya. We did lose on Alvey, but we won on Pennington. So when you bet 2 dogs like that, you're risking 1 unit on each of them, you are showing profit. So we were sitting really good going into the back half of this fight. The featherweight clash between Alex Caceres and Steven Peterson, if you made me make a pick, I think I would have gone Peterson, but that's just because I don't bet on Alex Caceres because he's a perennial bed shitter. He got it done. He looked phenomenal. He actually completely outclassed Peterson, bell to bell, and that surprised me. So I think there was definitely value to be had on that line. But again, that's 2020 hindsight. Going into the fight, I never felt comfortable putting any kind of money on him. So congrats to anybody that cashed on Alex Caceres. The sad story of our night continues at heavyweight, where our parlay was already busted, but that's where Big Ben Rothwell really laid an egg. And props to everybody who bet Andrei Arlovski, because I thought, now the reason I wanted to make this bet was because, honestly, I thought that Andrei Arlovski was going to be more shot than Big Ben Rothwell. And that was really the reason why I agreed with the line on Big Ben being such a favorite. But it was so wrong. It was so backwards. Arlovski very clearly had more in the tank. Arlovski very clearly had a better chin. And his boxing looked more on point than I have ever seen. Andrei Arlovski put on a clinic. Now, it did look like Big Ben was going to be able to get it done in the 3rd round when Andrei started to slow down. Ben dug deep and he poured it on. He landed some big shots. And it didn't matter for our parlay. The parlay was already busted. But anybody who bet Big Ben straight would have at least got their money at that point. And that's kind of what I was cheering for. Also, just for the bragging rights of saying I got the fight called correctly. I was hoping Ben would show up and give me a victory that I just didn't deserve, but he didn't quite get it done. Moving up the list, we got Alexander Hernandez versus Francisco Trinaldo in another head scratcher. This is one that I have a real hard time with. So, something that the older listeners, people who have been around for a while, you guys know that I have a poker background. I really got started gambling playing poker. So I think about value from a poker aspect. I think about really a lot of things as far as kind of the same way that I mentally work my way through a hand or a session of poker. And something that they always say in poker is that you either win or you learn. You don't lose, you pay for that knowledge. And that's all that you can get, is you get that experience and that money that it cost you. Don't think of that as losing money. Think of that as learning a lesson. And we learned a lot at UFC San Antonio. And that's where, when I admitted a little earlier that we made several mistakes, we will learn from those mistakes. Here's one of them. So Alexander Hernandez, I felt very, very super confident in this kid. And I was sure that the beating he took from Cerrone was going to light a fire under him, and he was going to come back better, and he was going to come back stronger. And he just didn't. He came back. He looked more of a point fighter. He didn't want to engage. He didn't want to get anywhere near Trinaldo's power. But I think that did kind of show a wrinkle in his game. That's a new level to his game that he didn't have before. And I think people were taking that as a negative. And even myself, I took that as a negative while I was watching the fight. I was going, what are you doing, kid? Like, get in there. You can drop this guy. You can take this guy down, impose your will, do what made you great to get you here. But you know what? He saw what you could do to an opponent who's stationary. Everything that Cerrone did to him, he's trying to implement that in his game. And he won relatively easily against Trinaldo. Now, I know a lot of people out there are going to cry robbery and they think Trinaldo actually won this fight. There was an aspect of home cooking. This is one where he definitely got a push from the hometown crowd going nuts every single time he landed a little kick. Every single time he pitter-patted a little punch, the hometown crowd went nuts for him, and I'm sure the judges took that into effect in their scoring. But Trinaldo didn't do shit. I mean, this fight was on the table for Trinaldo to steal. Trinaldo very easily could have won this fight, but he didn't do anything. Hernandez landed way more often than Trinaldo did. Trinaldo missed a lot of his shots. Hernandez was the more active of the two fighters. He was constantly circling, constantly trying to find an angle. I don't know. Anybody that cries robbery on this fight, I think is wrong. I do not agree with the 30-27 scorecard. I think it should have been a 29-28. And really, it could have gone either way. If Francisco Trinaldo won that fight 29-28, I wouldn't have complained. I could completely see somebody scoring the fight that way. However, I also think it was very easily a 29-28 for Hernandez. And that's just my personal opinion. I don't believe it was a 30-27 for Hernandez. So we got a little extra home cooking there, which those of you who may not be familiar with the term, home cooking is when a hometown fighter gets an edge. The judges really look kind of more favorably on them because the crowd has their back, because the crowd gets noisy and loud every time they do anything. That's what we refer to as home cooking. And we were the beneficiary of that here in this spot, I feel like. So locked that one up. We got another winner on the night, and we only had 3 plays going into the back half of the card. And at this point, we are already locked up to have, at worst, a very small losing night. Less than 1 unit. Worst case scenario, we're down less than a unit, and I'm feeling good at this point. We have done so well up until this point, and then it all just fell apart. So the lightweight fight goes down, James Vick versus Dan Hooker, and this is a spot where these two fights were very, very similar. Alexander Hernandez, Francisco Trinaldo. Alexander was the favorite, and he came off of a life-changing beating and a lesson from a veteran fighter. And I was high enough and willing to bet minus 162 on that kid. But then you go to James Vick and Dan Hooker, and it's the same exact circumstance. I am really high on Dan Hooker, and he took a beating from Barbosa, and he came in as a much smaller favorite. He was minus 140, minus 130. And I told myself that I didn't think there was value on that line unless he hit even money. And I don't know why that is. Looking back on it, I was very, very sure that this was going to be a gunfight, and I know the kind of heat that James Vick brings to the table, and I didn't know what kind of condition Dan Hooker would be in. And maybe that's because I thought the extended beating that Hooker took was going to be more damaging than the TKO that Alexander Hernandez took. And I know the TKO is a bit more violent, I guess. Maybe it'll have longer lasting effects, but it was shorter. Dan Hooker walked through so much damage that I was honestly worried that his body hadn't recovered by now. But when you look at these things from a straight line value, if I'm willing to play Alexander Hernandez without some crazy extra reason. I should be willing to play Dan Hooker. That's like when we talk in poker, if you're willing to raise with a hand, like let's just, for example, if you're in middle position and you're willing to raise ace 10, and then your next hand is ace jack and you fold it, that doesn't make sense. Why are you raising ace 10 but not ace jack? It's essentially the same hand, maybe just a little bit better, and you're only one more spot out of position. It's not that big of a difference. You should play both if you're going to play both. If you're going to play one, you should play both. Sorry about that. And that's kind of what happened here. I stuck to my guns, and that's something that I think is valuable. The fact that I said, I think there's value on this line here, and I drew my line in the sand, and I refused to bet it until it got to that spot. I think that that's a very, very good way to handle things, and I'm happy with myself for making that decision simply because I know I've got the gumption to be able to stick to my guns and only play a line that I like. That's a good thing, especially when it comes to self-control and sports betting. That's a very, very good thing. But in this case, I was wrong. I should have played Dan Hooker at minus 130. I should have played Dan Hooker at minus 140. The fact that I played Alexander at minus 160 is, these are literally identical situations. So enough on that. I know I've kind of talked myself in a circle here, but I'm just trying to express how wrong I was to play one and not the other. I should have either passed on Alexander Hernandez for the same reasons that I passed on Dan Hooker, or I should have played Dan Hooker for the same reasons that I played Alexander Hernandez. I felt kind of like I was making too many plays on UFC San Antonio, and in hindsight, I honestly think I did make too many plays. But if I could go back, obviously, I'm trying not to be clouded by the hindsight of how these bets turned out, but there are some plays that I would not have made, and I think I should have played Dan Hooker, not because he won by brutal first round TKO, because that would have put us in profit if I had added him to the list, but because of the situations. Because I assessed that it was okay to play Hernandez, I should have done the same thing on Hooker. So let's move on. We get to the heavyweight division, and man, this card just so awkward and strange and weird. Greg Hardy gets in there with Juan Adams, and I know he landed a couple of big shots, but Juan Adams actually looked really good. He was the faster of the two, and he hit Hardy hard a couple of times, and I could tell that it affected Hardy. Now, people are going to tell me I'm crazy, but I think if they ran this back, Juan Adams would win. I kind of hope that they make that rematch, because the way Juan Adams reacted afterward, and that's another thing. People are getting all worked up about this one. They're saying Juan Adams is unprofessional for storming out of the cage because he felt like it was an early stoppage. These are fighters that put their lives on the line, and they put everything into weeks of preparation. And then to have something end like that and not be happy, especially thinking that he was, mistreated or something like that. Of course he's hot. Of course he's going to storm out. We've seen that before, and no one's cried outrage for it, so leave the guy alone. The flip side of that, Greg Hardy, people were getting on him about celebrating when he got his hand raised. Dude, the world hates this guy. Now, I'm not saying that I support Greg Hardy or anything like that, but I think people deserve second chances, and he's trying to, make his way in life after the mistakes that he made, so I'm not going to continue harping on the bad things that he's done. Obviously, I don't like him, and I don't agree any at all with what he's done, but Luke Thomas is the guy that said, if you can't fight in a cage in the United States of America for a living, what can you do? And I completely agree with that. We are signing up to watch violence. You want a guy that's going to provide violence in there, and that's all we're doing. So I will watch him fight. I won't like him as a person, but I want to just kind of put to rest everything that Greg Hardy's done. But the fact that he was celebrating, like he gets his hand raised and he starts dancing, like we've seen people do backflips off the freaking cage and everyone loves it. We've seen Jose Aldo run out into the crowd and body surf in Brazil, and everyone thinks that's so cool. But Greg Hardy can't wiggle his hips after he gets a win when the planet has repeatedly told him how much he's a scumbag and how much they hate him. I don't get that. Let the guy dance. He just won a fight. But back to the actual fight itself is so weird because it was, honestly, in my opinion, very competitive. Now, Juan Adams dove in for a takedown, and Hardy just shook him off. And that was something that, okay, like right there, eye-opening to me, because I knew Juan Adams would have the wrestling advantage. I'm not going to say think, because just because that takedown didn't work doesn't mean Juan Adams doesn't have a wrestling advantage. He definitely does. But Greg Hardy's athleticism closed that gap. The power that dude has in his legs and his hips was enough to completely throw Juan from the takedown. And that was something that kind of opened my eyes to just how physically gifted Greg Hardy is. I knew he was physically gifted, but I didn't know where the level of it was. I didn't know where the limit to it was. Now I know. Holy crap. Like, he sent a 265-pound man flying with his hip. So Juan gets in on there on the takedown, and Greg Hardy just starts pounding away. And honestly, I was happy with this because I knew Greg Hardy would gas himself out. Looking for that finish, it was obvious that Juan Adams was not out. Everyone wants to talk about how hurt he is and how bad that was, and he was honestly fine. He was covered up. A bunch of those strikes were back to the back of the head, which are technically speaking illegal, and he was covering his head with his arm. So yeah, he was banged up. Yeah, he was probably a little bit rocked, but he wasn't flatlined, and he still had very much control of Greg Hardy's leg. The second that Greg Hardy slowed down, I wanted to see what happened, and now we never will. And that's what sucks to me, because I think Greg Hardy would have gassed out, and I honestly think Juan Adams would have diced him up as soon as he got back to his feet. Now, the flip side to that is that maybe he never gets back to his feet. Maybe Greg Hardy sneaks a hand in there, and he does clip the chin and put him out cold, and the referee saved Juan Adams, years of his life and brain cells. So we can what if all we want here. The fact comes down to we lost this one. And this is another one where I feel like I've learned a very valuable lesson. This one and the next fight. So I'm going to talk about the next fight, and then I'll close in on that lesson. Alexei Oleinik versus Walt Harris. If we are talking about our segment, Regret the Bet from last week, I regret this bet. Now, I learned a lesson from it, so I don't regret it that bad, but I wish I hadn't bet on Alexei Oleinik. Alexei Oleinik, I talked about all of this. He had all the pieces. And Walt Harris, this is where the lesson comes in, because I did not think that Walt Harris was that great of a fighter. Even if Walt Harris has a ceiling as far as what he's capable of as a fighter, even if he's got a limit to his skills and his abilities, just like Greg Hardy's athleticism with Juan Adams, the athleticism closed the gap between his skill set and Alexei Oleinik's, and I didn't see that. I had kind of a bad sinking feeling going into this week. The closer we got to fight time, the worse I felt about this bet specifically. I talked with a buddy about it. Shout out to my man, Fat Fist Nick over there. I talked about this one. And as much as I really like Alexei Oleinik, and when I got started, I really liked this bet and this play, that athleticism gap was really bothering me. I was like, man, I don't know how he's going to get the takedown. Because the whole thing with Alexei is he's got to drag you to the mat, and that means he's got to close the distance. And I'm like, man, he is slow and plodding. And Walt Harris is surprisingly fast and light on his feet for a man his size. So, like I said, even if Alexei is the more skilled fighter, Walt is going to be able to outmove him. And that's exactly what happened. And it happened a whole lot faster than I ever expected. Walt Harris gets the KO in round 1 at 12 seconds. Holy shit, 12 seconds. He landed some lightning fast bombs, and Alexei was gone. And it was just, I mean, again, 2020 hindsight, but it was completely eye-opening to me that I was like, oh, mistake. Are any of you fans of the show also fans of Scrubs? Because I love Scrubs. It's absolutely one of my favorite shows and always has been, but JD has the opera singing mistake guy. That one episode where every time he messes up, the guy in the background belts it out. He's just like, mistake. And I always see that in my head when I get into situations like this, and I think I need that guy. Maybe I'll record an audio clip of that, because that'd be pretty great every time I mess up to hear that. Or either that or the Archer womp womp. So that was a mistake. Again, lesson learned though. And it's so funny to me because on this main card, we got the back-to-back, I think I learned these lessons so well because both of them happened in quick succession with one another. Hernandez and Hooker, Hardy and Harris. It was like boom, 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 boom. Same lessons. It was almost like the MMA gods were trying to drill that lesson into me, going, look, you messed up here. Look, you messed up here. Now go back and do it again. So we get to the main event. And this was a really intriguing fight from the get-go. Leon Edwards is the man. He showed up and dominated Rafael Dos Anjos for 5 full rounds. And The moments where I thought Dos Anjos would pick it up and get back in the fight, Edwards had a game plan and was able to shut that down entirely. You know, I said that the biggest reason I thought I should be betting on RDA was because when you go well-rounded skill set for well-rounded skill set against him, you don't win. Edwards proved me wrong. He absolutely proved me wrong. That takedown at the very beginning of the fight in the first round, able to hold Rafael down and control him. And then in the second round, when RDA started having some grappling advantages and he started getting some advantageous positions and he attacked with submissions, I thought it was going to be over. I thought RDA was going to turn the tide right there in round 2 and start pouring it on Edwards. And if he didn't lock up the submission, it was going to put enough doubt into Edwards that it was going to turn the tide and Rafael would really have the momentum going forward in the fight. But Edwards shut that down too. And then he busted him up and he knocked that giant cut over his eye open. It was a very impressive performance. And lesson learned on this one, that I felt like I flipped too hard. Sometimes, the podcast is for entertainment. I'm here to joke around, have a good time with you guys and have some fun. And I feel like you always want to bet the main event. The main event is everything that you lead up to. It's the last fight at the end of the show. It's the last fight at the end of the night. Everyone wants to have money on the main event. Sometimes it's okay to pass on the main event, I think. And that's another lesson that I feel like I need to learn here, because last week's episode, I told you all, I came in feeling like I wanted to tell you to bet Leon Edwards. He had all the physical advantages. He had the age advantage. And then I talked myself into Rafael Dos Anjos. And the line was super close that essentially you're not getting much value on either side of the line. You're just picking the winner of the fight. When it's a pick'em price or it's like a minus 110 plus 105 type situation, you're not getting a whole lot of value on anybody. And that's what I said, is I thought there was very, very, very thin value on Rafael Dos Anjos, and maybe I was right. We've talked before about good bets don't always win and bad bets don't always lose. But I don't know that even getting that quote-unquote thin value that I thought was there, I don't know if it was the right thing to do. It was so close, I think I should have passed. Because when you want to bet one guy first, and then you talk yourself into betting the other side, obviously you think you have a read and you want to stick with your read and trust yourself, so you go with it. But it was really close. I think I could have gotten away from that one. So, hindsight, lots of lessons learned, and that's why I took a little bit to go ahead and recap everything from last week, because I feel like I learned a lot of very valuable things, and I wanted to pass those on and discuss that with you guys. I will be putting a timestamp on here, so if this is too dry and too boring for everybody to do the recap, don't worry, you can skip right on past it. And it's funny I said that, because if you hit the time skip and past it, you're not going to hear this part anyway. So, the last thing I want to go about, the last lesson that I feel like I learned is I was wrong on several fighters because I had a preconceived notion of them, and I refused to change that preconceived notion. My brain tells me Andrei Arlovski is shot, and I've been saying that for a long time. Now, I know he's lost his last couple fights, but we talked about how close they were and how really gritty split decisions they've been, but I never gave him the credit that he was actually potentially winning those fights. I always just went, oh, he keeps losing and he's bad. And that's not true. He showed us that he is in way better shape than we thought he was in. Big Ben Rothwell, I thought that he got robbed, and I thought that he won the fight with Blagoy Ivanov, and I even said that I refused to go back and watch that fight again because I think that he won it, and I don't want to see it anymore. Well, that is wrong, because he's way more shot than I thought he was. So maybe he didn't win that fight. Maybe he didn't win that fight against Blagoy Ivanov, and I just had blinders on because I had a bet on Rothwell. So I need to go back and watch that fight. I need to pay more attention and actually look for the opportunity to learn where Rothwell's actually at the next time I study him. Same thing with a guy like Greg Hardy. I had it in my head that he was nothing but a murderous power puncher, and the athleticism that he showed really, really surprised me, and the same exact situation with Walt Harris. So I will pocket all of these lessons, and we are going to parlay those into cash. Let's roll right on into UFC 240. I'm excited. Let's get this thing done. So just to recap the record for 2019, we are 83-76, and yes, I know that sounds not very impressive, but we are up 27.93 units here on the podcast, and that, my friends, is impressive. So let's keep that rolling. For all you new listeners, the goal at the end of 2019 is to be up 50 units. That's where I want to get. Realistically speaking, we are already having a good time, and I do not want this to happen, but if we were to float right around this level and just kind of play it even for the rest of 2019, that's already a damn good year. Being up almost 30 units is a good freaking year as far as sports betting is concerned. So if we keep doing this up and down 1-2 units type things, nobody get too concerned. It's really not that big of a deal. We're in a good spot. We're going to keep that rolling up when we find good spots, and let's get this thing going. First fight of the night is a heavyweight tilt between Tanner Boser and Giacomo Lemos. Now this one, once again, interesting fight because both of these guys are making their UFC debuts. Tanner Boser is 16-5-1, and Lemos is an undefeated 6-0. So it's interesting that they've got both of these guys, one so fresh and hot off the presses, and the other one relatively experienced, both of them making their UFC debuts against each other. And that's not where the differences end. These guys couldn't be more different from one another. Tanner is a slow, plodding, Roy Nelson type of roly-poly looking heavyweight, whereas Lemos on the other side of things is a brick shithouse. So the thing is, Tanner Boser is super slow and plodding. He's got very basic striking. He attempts some head kicks, but the biggest thing is he really stays out of range. He's throwing these big, wild, heavy punches, but it's always at the very, very end of his striking range. He swings and whiffs a lot. And I gotta wonder if some of the decisions on his record have gone his way because of him just appearing to be the more active fighter. He has 8 KOs, 2 submissions, and 6 decisions. And he has by far fought against the more, the higher level of competition between these two guys. He hasn't done very well when he steps up against the higher echelon of things, but he has fought a slightly higher level of competition than Lemos has. Lemos, on the other hand, is a physical beast. He's a monster. He's got KO power in both hands and knees, but he's absolutely sloppy. He is not a polished striker. He throws these big winging hooks and these big overhands. Now, if he gets you on the ground, he's not a very accomplished wrestler as far as getting people to the ground, but if he can knock you down or manage a takedown, he does have big, powerful double legs where he literally is just going to out-muscle you to get you on your back. Once he gets you there, he's a gorilla, and I mean that in the best possible way. He gets on top of you, and you're not going anywhere, and he just starts hammering, and it's not strategic hammering, so he's going to be limited. If he fights a good, savvy type veteran heavyweight, he's going to be in trouble. But I think against somebody like Tanner Boser, who's not the most athletic, and even though he is relatively experienced, he doesn't have, a skill set that's really, it's not going to benefit him, I guess, in this area. He's not some wizard on the mat that he's going to be able to pull a reversal. He's not fantastic at jiu-jitsu where he's going to keep, Lemos trapped in his guard or anything like that. If Lemos gets on top of him and starts just hammering down with both hands as hard as he can like a gorilla, he will get TKO'd. I guarantee that. And this is one that's kind of surprising to me. A lot of people are coming in on Boser here. As a matter of fact, 92% of the money has come in on Boser. He opened up as a slight favorite, -155, and that's pushed him all the way up to about -175. The comeback on Lemos is +154. And this is a spot where I think both fighters are very, very limited. Like I said, I know Tanner Boser has had the higher level of experience and he seems to be the more accurate fighter, but Lemos kills people when he hits them. He's very sloppy, but he has crushing power. And if he can pin the smaller roller-polier Boser up against the fence, or if he can get him down on the ground, he will flatten him. And Boser isn't really... He has been knocked out. Back in 2015, Tim Hague got him, so he is capable of being put out, and Tim Hague is a name that some of you may recognize. He's a decently well-known previous fighter. I mean, he's old school, but you might remember that one. He's not doing great himself. I mean, he's a bit older. He's 21-13. I mean, he's got 1 win in his last 5, but when he fought Boser back in 2015, he got him out of there in 6 seconds. So I think this is a spot where we can go back to old faithful. This is a strategy that I have not implemented for a long time, but middling heavyweights. When you get these middle of the road heavyweights where neither of them are very good, neither of them have great skill set, and the line is too wide, one guy can end it. I'm going to take the guy that can end it. I think that the money is coming in on the wrong side of things. I do not think that Tanner Boser has the kind of footwork and speed that it's going to take to, outclass a guy like Lemos over 3 rounds. I think Lemos will be able to just completely physically dominate this guy. And even though that's not going to work on a lot of people, I think it works here. I'm going to go ahead and take the shot on Lemos at plus 154. We're going to start our night off right. We're going to run with the dogs like we always do. Let's make that cash. Next up, we are headed to the welterweight division where Erik Koch is facing Kyle Stewart. And this is one that I feel like I may have messed up on just a little bit. Now, obviously, those of you who are new, again, welcome. Thank you for supporting the show. Those of you who have been with me know that if you follow me over on Twitter at DieHardMMAPod, if I really like a line and it's something that I feel like is going to potentially move before we get to the podcast, I will tweet it out early so that way you guys don't miss out on the value that I see on something that may potentially get away from us. And I think I goofed here. It's not that bad, but it could have been better for us. So the line opened up with Kyle Stewart being a minus 145 favorite and Erik Koch being a plus 125 underdog. He was sitting right around plus 115, plus 110 when I decided that I think I'm going to take a shot on Erik Koch. I know I'm kind of showing my hand prior to the breakdown here, but I should have tweeted that out because I felt like other people were going to see what I was seeing. And sure enough, money has poured in on Erik Koch. We can just barely squeak him out at even money. We can get plus 100 on him, and I will be taking the plus 100. Kyle Stewart is 30 years old, and he fights out of the MMA lab here in Phoenix, Arizona. He's 11-2. He's one of these guys that came off the Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. He had kind of a less than impressive Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series where his opponent got hurt. So rather than getting signed, he kind of took the long way around, took some fights outside the UFC, and then finally got his chance. Now, he debuted against Chance Rencounter, who we know now is an absolute monster. He got submitted in the very first round by Chance Rencounter, and it was painfully obvious that he was going to be out-grappled in that spot. And again, that was kind of Chance's coming out party. That was before we knew exactly how awesome Chance was going to be. Looking forward to that guy's next fight. The big thing with Kyle Stewart is that he apparently has a bit of a hole in his game when it comes to the grappling. Now, that can also be said for Erik Koch, which is why this fight gets so interesting. Kyle Stewart stays in the pocket. He does have good head movement, and he parries pretty well. He's got good defense when he's up against the cage. He's got his back up against the fence, and he actually has decent guard when he's on his back on the ground, and he does everything he can to get back to his feet. He's mostly a striker, and one thing I find interesting about him is that he's got a military background, so he does have that dig deep, never quit type of attitude, which is really something that you want in a fighter. I value that a whole lot, because when you put your money on somebody, you want to be absolutely certain they're going to fight for every single penny. Once again, this is a spot where the same thing can be said for his opponent. Koch never quits. He's also primarily a striker. He is explosive, though. He is powerful. I mean, out of these two guys, I think Koch is the more violent puncher. He has really, really good top control when this thing does hit the mat, and he has some excellent ground and pound. He does have an offensive guard game. I'm sorry, not guard game. He's got an offensive ground game. He really goes for submissions when he's on the ground. He tries to beat you up, and as soon as he realizes he's got you hurt, he'll try to choke you out. The problem is he doesn't have very good takedowns. He does have good trips, and most of the time when he gets it to the ground, it's because he knocked his opponent down. He throws powerful, hard head kicks, and that's kind of his go-to move. A lot of the times that'll get it done for him. Now, this is a really, really weird spot, though. He's had kind of a spotty past here in the UFC. He's 15-6-0, but he's also very young. He's only 30 years old, so he's really kind of coming into his prime at this point. He showed up on fire. He got into the UFC, and he delivered the first ever one and only knockout of Rafael Assunção. And that means something. You do not knock out a guy like Rafael Assunção unless you have got it. So that is a crazy, crazy thing for him to pull off. But I do think that that may have been a situation where Assunção came in underprepared, maybe underestimating his opponent, kind of like how Alexander Hernandez came in, where you just don't think he's going to be that dangerous, and he wakes you up real quick. even given that Rafael Assunção may have underestimated him, nobody's knocked out Rafael Assunção. This is the only guy to do it. So he's got serious power. So then he wins against Jonathan Brookins. He drops back-to-back fights against Dustin Poirier and Ricardo Lamas. And that's where it's like, okay, so those are legit guys. Even back in 2013, those were very legit names, and those losses have aged very, very, very well. But that was down at 145. This guy was fighting all the way down at 145. He kind of rejuvenated his career. He tried to move up to 155 because it became apparent that he was just cutting too much weight to get down there. And he actually had a hard time at 155 as well. Now, he had tough, gritty fights against both Clay Guida and Bobby Green, but he lost unanimous decisions in both. And a lot of that came down to him being out-grappled. He had a real hard time with the wrestling. Now, he only fought once in 2017. That was the loss to Clay Guida. And like we said, he's had a bit of a hole in his game as far as the wrestling is concerned. So Clay Guida was a bad matchup for him. And then he's only fought once in 2018, and that was against Bobby Green. Normally speaking, when a young fighter gets losses like this and they start running to a different weight class, I see that as a red flag. But in this case, I see that as a fighter very much like Anthony Rumble Johnson, where he finally realized that he is in the wrong place. It's a lot like Dustin Poirier as well. He realized he was killing himself and he had the wrong body for those weight classes. He's making his welterweight debut. This guy used to cut all the way down to 145, and now he's finally fighting up at 170. The key to all of this is search for Erik Koch, that's Koch, on Instagram. He is a brick shithouse at 170. This guy should have been at 170 a long time ago, and the time that he's taken off to move up to 170 means he's doing it right. He has his strength and conditioning in order, and he has put on some serious muscle and some serious size. So I think he's got the striking credentials to hang with a guy like Kyle Stewart. Neither of them really are grapplers, so I don't see a whole lot of that happening unless they get into a scrambly type of situation. And honestly, I expect Erik Koch to get the better of Kyle Stewart when it comes to that situation. I think he unbelievably is going to be the stronger of the two fighters here, even though Kyle is the 170 pounder that's been hanging around at 170 a lot more often. I think Koch is going to show up and really shock people with how strong he is in his new weight class. He's one of these guys that has all the skills, and he's just never been able to put it together. And something that's very, very difficult to do when it comes to MMA fighting is, MMA betting, is judging when a fighter will put it all together. It's kind of like that Walt Harris situation that I talked about again, that he's a guy that I, in my brain, put a limit to what he's capable of on him, and then he clicked it. He got it all together at the right time, and he blasted the hell out of Olenek because of that. And I think that's what we're going to see here with Erik Koch. He trains at Rufus Sport. He's got a real smart team around him, so he's going to be very, very well prepared. He does have a good skill set. He's got violent submissions. He's got violent knockout power. And I think at the new weight class, he's just going to be too powerful and he's going to overwhelm Stewart. So we are going to roll at Erik Koch, and luckily we'll get him at even money at this point. We could have locked up that plus 115, but unfortunately I was a little slow on the trigger, but I will take even money. I don't think that this is a coin flip. Erik Koch has fought a lot higher competition than Kyle Stewart has. The one time Stewart dipped his toe in with Chance Rincounter, he got whooped. And I know that's his UFC debut. That's a hard thing to do, but we don't know exactly where Kyle Stewart's ceiling is. We know that Erik Koch is capable of standing in there toe-to-toe with guys like Dustin Poirier, Clay Guida, Bobby Green, Rafael Assunção. We know he can get in there and compete with guys of that caliber, even if it was some time ago, and he's only grown and developed since then. So we will take that shot. Erik Koch, plus 100. Let's do it. Next up, we are headed back to the ladies. We're going to the women's flyweight division, and since we are on such a roll with the women, we are going to make a play. That's right, early prelims. We are going 3 for 3 on bets. I am stoked, and I'm going to be very, very careful because this is what we did last time, and then we shit the bed on the main card, and I'm not doing it this week. We have Gillian the Savage Roberts facing off against Sarah Atreta Frota. And I'm sure Frota means something in Brazil. and it just makes her sound really, really weird since I don't know what it means. I should probably look that up. But Sarah FROTA stepped into the UFC. She came off of the Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series with a brutal, vicious first-round KO of her opponent. Oddly enough, I thought this was pretty interesting here. She steps into the UFC, and she just didn't look at all the same. I think she missed weight by a large amount, but she looked like a giant in there. So she's actually moving up a weight class here where she should be to face Gillian Robertson. Now, the Savage has a 6-3 record. I'm sorry, FROTA's 9-1, by the way. She dropped that UFC debut, but before that, she was 9-0. So people are kind of riding high on her. She's also a monster. She's a very scary looking individual, I'll tell you that much. So Gillian Robertson, she's 6-3-0. And I know that doesn't sound that great, but we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, where the women's records, because it's such a small world right now in women's MMA, especially over here in the States, you can get women like FROTA over in Brazil who can rack up a big win, a run of good, solid wins, and have a record like she does coming into the UFC, because there's a whole lot to compete with over there. Especially stateside, it's hard to get fights at the top level or near the top level to get you into the UFC. So a lot of women have these kind of middle of the road, bad looking records, and it does not speak to just how good they are. Rocky Pennington last week was a perfect example of that. She was 9-7, but she's one of the best out there. And it's hard to believe with that kind of record, but it's true. So here we go with Gillian Robertson. I am so high on this girl. And one of my favorite things about her is she's got this fiery dyed red hair. And those of you who don't know, I have a weakness for the redheads. I'm allowed to say that. I married one. I love redheads, and she just looks awesome when she gets in there, and her red hair just pops while she's in the fight. It really draws the eye. It's a good marketing choice for her to go with that red hair. So here's the thing. She is insanely aggressive. She's got a massive pressuring style, and she sells out for the takedown. She's got a chain grappling, almost woman Khabib style wrestling, where she just goes hardcore for the takedown, and she will not stop until she gets it. Once she gets the takedown, she's got very offensive grappling as far as offensive power ground and pound, very solid, slick guard passing. She's got an amazing jiu-jitsu game. She trains at ATT, which is one of the, American Top Team, which is one of the best gyms in the world, and she hails out of Canada. So she's going to be the hometown girl on this card. So that brings us back around to last week. We are going to roll with the home cooking. Canada has been very, very suspect in the past. There have been a couple of real easy layup fights that they have turned on their heads and given to the hometown boys and girls, because that's what they want to see win. I'm not kidding. It's happened. It's a thing. There's some bad judging in Canada, and home cooking is a real thing. So we want to be on the right side in most of these fights. If a Canadian fighter, it's going to be close, roll with the Canuck. FROTA on the other side of things, her size is going to be... Honestly, I think her size is going to play into our game plan here. She's so long and tall. When you're wrestling, you want to be the shorter fighter. Robertson is not going to have an issue getting in on FROTA's legs because of how freaking tall FROTA is. Now, she does have good, solid Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and Robertson has been submitted once. Her third UFC fight, actually, she gave up an armbar, but it was to a super high level girl in Bueno Silva. She locked up a beautiful armbar. And honestly, that's one of those ones that I don't know that it was necessarily Robertson's fault, as more of the skill set of Silva coming through. So she was getting dominated by Robertson in the fight until she gave up the armbar, and it was kind of it was almost like a Hail Mary knockout where the armbar came out of nowhere. And trust me, when I say Hail Mary, I don't mean there was no skill attached to it. There was massive skill attached to it. She knows exactly what she was doing, but she locked it up and got it done really quickly, and it kind of came out of nowhere. She's also 5-0, so that's saying something. She's fighting at a very, very high level. So losing to a woman like that, especially in the UFC, not a mark against Robertson. She is 3-1 in her 4-fight tenure so far in the UFC. Back to FROTA. Like I said, she's got good solid Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and she's gonna be big. She was huge for the weight class down and had to move up because she was missing weight. She's very, very good when she's up against the cage, and she's a power striker. She does throw these big, looping, heavy punches that will hurt other women, because those are the kind of shots that the women just aren't used to taking. And I don't mean that from like a man perspective. I'm not trying to mansplain this to anybody. She hits differently than most other women strikers do. She's bigger than most of the other women, and the way she throws, it's heavy. It's heavy, heavy shots that most women aren't capable of throwing. They're much more crisper, they're cleaner, they're faster, and it's lighter. So she will hurt people. FROTA absolutely will hurt people on the feet. But I really think Gillian Robertson is going to be able to pressure her. I think she's going to be able to back her up, get her against the cage. And like I said, she really sells out for that takedown. I don't think FROTA is going to have enough time on the feet to land the kind of damage that she's going to need to. And here's the best part. The line opened up with FROTA being a plus 125 underdog. The comeback, I'm sorry, I did that backwards. Gillian Robertson is the favorite at minus 145, with the comeback on Sarah FROTA being plus 125. However, the betting public is all over FROTA because, like I said, she's very scary looking, she's very big, and she does have power for the women's division, which is something that people take that as an opportunity to win the fight, which it is. I'm not counting that out. But Gillian Robertson is a dangerous threat on the ground. She's got 6 wins, and 5 of those have come by submission. She's got an 83% submission finish rate. I think she gets FROTA on the mat. And even if FROTA is able to defend the submissions, because she does have a good BJJ game from her back, I honestly wouldn't be shocked if Robertson pounded her out. Robertson's ground and pound is brutal, and she may not have that kind of power when she's on the feet, but when she hits the mat, she's mean, man. We are going to be all over Gillian Robertson here. I think this line should be wider. I would make Robertson like a minus 165, minus 180 type of favorite. The fact that the public has bet her down to minus 130, I'm ready to do a cartwheel. Let's lay it. We're going to go minus 130 with Gillian Robertson. All right, let's move on back to the men. We've got a flyweight fight here between Alexander Pantoja and Deiveson Figueiredo. This is such a fun fight. This is really good matchmaking. Alexander Pantoja is 21-3-0. He's 29 years old, and he's facing off against Figueiredo, who we successfully faded in his last fight. He is 31 years old, and in the words of my man Goldie, everything else is virtually identical. They're both 5'4". They're both 125 pounders, and Deiveson Figueiredo has a half-inch reach advantage. It's 67.5 for Pantoja, 68 for Figueiredo, so not a whole lot there. This fight is so good. So Pantoja has an absolute monstrous, well-rounded game. He's solid striking power. He's dangerous to finish this thing absolutely anywhere the fight takes place. And when I say he's well-rounded, he is super well-rounded. He's got 6 decision wins, 7 TKOs, and 8 submissions. He is a threat anywhere this fight takes place. Now, he's very long and rangy for the flyweight division. He's got very fast hands, and he finishes combos really well with leg kicks. That's something that I really like to see. When your opponent thinks the combo is over and they're just trying to kind of get out of the way or counter back, and then they eat a leg kick at the end of every single one, that stuff adds up. It's that extra little tidbit of damage that you're doing that your opponent isn't. And I love that Pantoja goes to that, and I love that he goes to that often. He's got brilliant Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and he has excellent submission attacks off of his back. It's one of those things where it's almost like Anthony Pettis, where when you put him on his back, you are not just going to grind on top of him. He is almost more in control off of his back than he is on top of you, because he will be attacking. He's got a phenomenal takedown defense, especially for the class that he is in. Now, flip side over on Figueiredo, he's got a slight reach advantage, like I said, and he is a bomb powerful striker. He's maybe the hardest hitter in the division outside of the champion Henry Cejudo. He's only got the 1 loss. He was undefeated going into his last fight, and he just really stalks his opponents down. He's that guy that walks forward, and you're really afraid to get into range with this guy, because you know as soon as he sees an opportunity to counter, he's going to, and it's going to hurt. He's got really good top control, and he's got powerful takedowns. He will lock you up and use his strength advantage and just kind of ragdoll you to the ground. Once he gets there, it's hard to get him off you because of how strong he is for this division. I know I keep saying that word, but when you watch him fight, it's hard to describe it any other way. He's just so powerful. Now, he picks his shots really well. And he, like I said, he's a power striker. He wants to counter. He wants to find his window. He's got a solid jaw, and he doesn't really wear damage all that badly. So he will walk through your shot to land his. He's got a 53% knockout rate. 8 of his 15 wins have come by knockout, and he has killer instinct. Such killer instinct. When you are hurt, he knows it, and he will press his advantage until you're unconscious. He's really fun to watch. The thing here is, I think that Figueiredo is weak to a very specific kind of fighter, and I think that Formiga put the book out on how you beat this guy. He's a slow, plodding, walk-forward striker, and unless he lands that KO, he's going to have a hard time winning, especially at the upper echelons of flyweight, because if these guys are good enough to move around you and dart in and out and land shots, they're going to win these close, hairy decisions, and he will drop them to guys like that unless he can actually get in there and crack those chins. So Pantoja has a massive strike differential. He lands 4.31 significant strikes a minute. Figueiredo only lands 1.91 significant strikes per minute. That's a big difference. And I know that leans to their styles. That just shows how active Pantoja is being versus how active Figueiredo is. Now, Figueiredo will have plenty of opportunities to counter there. So this fight gets hairy because if you want to go with Pantoja, you are trying to simply fade the power bombs of Figueiredo. And if you want to bet on the power of Figueiredo, you're betting on the fact that he's going to be able to hunt Pantoja down and hit him, which really nobody's been able to do so far. So it's a real fun fight, but I think we're going to go back to the well here. We're going to roll with Alexander Pantoja to really follow the game plan that Formiga put out there. He's going to have the footwork. He's going to have the speed. He's going to have the skill set to get in and out before Figueiredo is able to land that big, crushing, punishing bomb. And if Figueiredo decides to take this thing to the ground, Pantoja will have the ability to get back to his feet, or he will have the offensive game from the ground to lock up some kind of submission. Now, I know Figueiredo's only lost once, and it was by decision, so it's not like he's going to be easy to submit, but Pantoja is a real threat down there, and more so than a lot of the guys that Figueiredo has fought, so I wouldn't count it out. This is another good one for us where we missed the line a little bit, but it's okay. It opened up with Pantoja being a slight favorite, minus 135. We are not the only person seeing that Pantoja can follow the game plan. He was a plus 115 dog, and he is bet down to minus 118. That's not a lot of juice, but I think that's about where this should be, maybe even a little bit wider because Figueiredo's got more of a puncher's chance really than anything. I don't know that his skill is going to match up well with Pantoja. I think Pantoja is the better fighter. We will take it. I wish we could get the dog money or even money, but it's close enough. I will take it. Minus 118 on Alexander Pantoja. Here we are again in the featherweight division where Galvin Tucker, who goes by Govna, his fight name is Govna, I love it. Galvin Tucker is facing Sung Woo Choi, who's another one of these big Asians stepping into the UFC that I'm actually kind of a fan of. Before, when you got these matchups, Asians would come in and they'd be smaller. They've got that whole idea that, you know, you're not supposed to cut that much weight. That gives you an unfair advantage. And they just kind of weren't into that. But they're learning. And this new wave of Asian fighters, they're something else. And I'm really high on the majority of them. So this is a fun fight. Tucker is 10-1-0. Sung Woo Choi is 7-2-0. And I have a decent bit to talk about on this one. First and foremost, I want to mention that Galvin Tucker hasn't fought since 2017. His last fight was his second UFC fight against Rick Glenn, which he dropped via unanimous decision. I wasn't able to find a whole lot of anything on him online as far as what he's been up to, if he's been training, you know, anything like that. So it's kind of sketchy having a fighter being off as long as he has been. Now, I did see that he was supposed to fight Andre Sukumtoth in 2018, but he got injured, so that doesn't bode well as far as how long he's taken off. Now, he has tended to struggle with taller opponents. He does fight for heel hooks. He gets in good scrambles. However, he absorbs 5.7 significant strikes per minute in his 2 UFC fights. He basically got beat to hell by the 2 guys that he fought, even beating Sam Sicilia and losing to Rick Lynn. 1 win, 1 loss. He absorbed a whole lot of damage. Now, Choi, on the flip side of this, is really big for the division. He takes damage super well. He's one of those guys that just tanks it. You don't really see the damage affecting him. He doesn't swell a whole lot. He doesn't cut easily. He can really absorb a lot of punishment and just doesn't show it. He's got really good, strong Muay Thai skills. He's got good, solid knees. He has good takedown defense. He's got excellent balance, but he does have some difficulty getting off of his back. So if you can get this guy down, you can maybe ride him out or deal some damage to him. But that's the trick, is getting him down in the first place. Considering Tucker has struggled with these kinds of opponents exactly in this kind of a spot, I don't really trust him here against Sungwoo Choi. And this is a weird spot with the betting line because Choi opened up a plus 165 favorite. And if you hit Choi at plus 165, congratulations. Gavin Tucker should never have been a minus 190 in this spot. I don't know who set this line. They probably lost their job with the bookie. The landslide of money that has come in on Choi has dropped this thing down to about plus 110. I see a plus 115. There's a plus 105. There's no value left in that. I don't know what's going to happen with this fight. We are going to completely steer clear of this fight. Tucker is the hometown kid. Prior to his UFC career, he looked very, very promising. He had a whole lot of shine on him. It really looked like he had a solid skill set. But then in the UFC, he kind of got his ass kicked, and then he got injured and disappeared for 2 years. We have no idea what he's going to look like. We have no clue if he has stayed sharp and motivated and he's going to come back strong, or if he's one of those guys that, you know, he's in Canada, maybe they'll just throw him a bone. Kind of like when Betch Correia fought when they were in Brazil the last time. She was nowhere near the level of fighter she was the last time we had seen her, and she was never that good to begin with. But the fact that they were in her hometown Brazil, it's not that far of a bus ride to get there and cash a paycheck. Maybe that's what's happening here with Gavin Tucker. He's the hometown kid. They want him on the card because they want to fill this thing with Canadians for the hometown crowd to cheer for. And Sungwoo Choi is going to give him problems because he is the exact kind of fighter that has given Tucker problems in the past. Now, that being said, remember I mentioned you want to be on the side of the hometown crowd here because we know how Canada scores these things. So you don't really want to go against the hometown guy if he's got an avenue to victory, which Tucker does have an avenue to victory. If he can get Sungwoo Choi down, he will grind out a decision. He will get the nod, the hometown cooking from the judges in Canada. So we are steering absolutely clear. If you can get more dog money, like I said, on Choi, go for it. But at this line, there's no value. I'm not laying any wood with Tucker when I have these questions about him, and I'm not getting enough juice on Choi to justify taking that shot when this is essentially a coin flip as far as I can tell at this point. We are dealing with a lot of the little lower weight classes on this card because we are sticking around featherweight where hometown phenom Hakeem Dawodu is taking on Yoshinori Horie. Which that is a fun, this is battle of the fun names. This fight is for who's got the best name at UFC 240. Hakeem Dawodu is 9-1-1. The other side of this with Yoshinori Horie is 8-1 and I've got to be really careful when I say that name. I could stumble really, really easily. So this one's crazy because I think this is the widest line. No, I'm wrong. This is not the widest line on the card. Scratch that. Never mind. I forgot about the main event. So Yoshinori Horie is a massive underdog here. Hakeem Dawodu opened up as a minus 400 favorite, and that line hasn't really budged. It's moved just barely a little bit. Most of the money is coming in on Horie due to the size of underdog that he is. He opened up at plus 325, and you can still find plus 325. There's a couple of spots where he's dropped down to about plus 180. I'm sorry, not 80, not 180, 280. That would be a massive line move. He's about plus 280, plus 320, somewhere in that ballpark, and you're still finding minus 380 to minus 400 on Dawodu. Both these guys are incredibly talented, and there's a lot of hype behind both of them. However, not so much on Horie because this will be his UFC debut. But trust me, this kid is legit. Now, he's got really good foot movement, really good head movement. He's got serious KO power, and he scrambles really, really well. He uses the cage really well to defend takedowns. He's able to get his back to the fence, use the fence to get back up. He's got a really well-rounded skill set, and all of his pro fights have come from Pancrase. So not the highest level of competition, but also not a bad level of competition either. Definitely something different from what he's going to find over here in the UFC, but I do believe this kid is UFC caliber. He's also really young. He's 24 years old, so we're going to need to look out for crazy jumps in his ability to improve. On the flip side of this, you have got Hakeem Dawodu, who is just a physical specimen. The dude came in and he dropped a submission to Danny Henry where it was a 39-second. He got rocked and then choked out. That one, it was kind of insane. It's a real fun one to watch. If you got a minute, go back and check it out. But he bounced back and he won 2 solid decisions against Austin Arnett and Kyle Bochniak. He's just a physical monster, and he stalks his opponents down. He's got good forward pressure, really explosive leg kicks, and he controls distance well. He controls the space well. This is, I don't really know what to do with this fight. This is another spot where I'm not sure how much weight Horie cuts, because he's ripped to shreds. If he cuts weight to get down where he is, man, he could really pose some problems. He's got serious scrambling ability. He's got really fast hands, and he's got 5 KOs. 5 of his 8 wins have come by knockout, and we've seen Dawodu get hit and hurt before. However, Dawodu is very skilled. He's got a solid, well-rounded skill set, but honestly, if there was a big underdog shit the bed type of fight, I think this one might be it. I'm very high on Hakeem, and he's done nothing but get better and better and better. Given that he's the hometown boy in Canada, given the type of skill set that he has, the fact that he's got 3 UFC fights under his belt already, I do think this is going to be just slightly too tall of a mountain for Horie to climb. I'm never laying that minus 400, and I'm not even going to suggest parlaying it because I think Horie's going to put up a fight here. I think this is going to be a much closer fight than people would imagine. If you're a degenerate like myself and you want a little extra action on the card to root for, throw a sprinkle on Horie, because at plus 325, that's a crazy wide line for a kid that's very, very talented and has a solid skill set and could definitely clip Dawodu. This is the kind of spot where you're getting the right price for banana peel. If you think you want to take a shot on Horie landing something big and shocking everybody, that's the one. But I'm not going to give it as an official pick. We will be passing on this fight, but watching it very, very closely because I'm interested to see what both of these guys can do. Next up, we have another women's fight where we have a changing of the guard. This is the preliminary card's main event, the final fight on the prelims here at UFC 240, the final free fight for those of you who are not going to pony up for the pay-per-view. We've got Alexis Davis, 19-9-0 UFC veteran, taking on Viviane Araujo, who has only had 1 UFC fight and is 7-1. She's a really exciting prospect. Alexis Davis has been around for a long time. She's 34 years old, and when it comes to the women's division, like I said, she's had a whole lot of fights. She's been fighting since all the way back in 2007, and she's really had a bit of a rough run of it. Basically every other fight. She fought Ronda Rousey back in 2014 when they were trying to line up cans for Rousey to smash and got KO'd in 16 seconds. She bounces back with a win over Sarah Kaufman. Then she gets subbed by Sarah McMahon. She puts together a 2-fight win streak, and then she drops 2 fights back to back. And it just seems like she's kind of falling apart at the seams at this point. She does have a decent offensive grappling game. When it gets to the ground, if she's on top, she can pass and move forward and advance. And she's got decent submissions, but she just seems to be slowing down. And Viviane, on the other side of things, is 32 years old, and she just feels younger and fresher. I know there's only 2 years apart from them, but she feels so much younger. She seems like she's 27. I mean, and I'm not talking about like the condition of her face or how pretty she is or anything like that. I just mean the energy that comes from her. She really does not feel like she's an older, withered fighter, whereas Davis does. She's getting started a lot later in her career, obviously, but she's putting together some serious wins. And even though Talita Bernardo is not that great of a UFC opponent, she absolutely handled her back in May of 2011. I'm really, really high on Araujo. I think she's going to cause a lot of problems for a lot of people, and I think the UFC sees that too. I think they're kind of giving her a layup here with Alexis Davis. This might be kind of a walking papers type of fight. Alexis Davis has dropped the last 2 fights in a row and hasn't looked all that impressive, even in the ones that she was winning before that. I think they're trying to give Araujo a cupcake here. And because of that, I think a lot of other people are seeing this as well. She opened up as a minus 275 favorite. However, most of the money, actually, I take that back. Most of the money has come in on Davis, and that makes me happy because right now we can get Viviane Araujo at minus 250. And I like that number. We are actually going to do what we did last week that we screwed up with Big Ben Rothwell. We are going to do a parlay, ladies and gentlemen. Put a pin in Viviane Araujo and hold on to that because we're going to need to remember her for later. Here we're getting to the big boys. We're headed up to 185 pounds where we'll take Marc-Andre Barriault facing Krzysztof Jotko. This is a fun fight. Marc-Andre Barriault is the newcomer, 11-2-0, and Krzysztof Jotko is the veteran who is 24-0. They're both 29 years old, though at very, very different points in their career. Marc-Andre Barriault, like I said, he's relatively new. He's only had 1 fight in the UFC, and he did drop that fight, which was unfortunate because we bet on him against Sanchez, and Sanchez showed up looking the best he has ever looked to go ahead and squeak out that win. Now, that's not really that big of a knock on Barriault because Sanchez is a good fighter. The UFC is a step up from what he's used to competing at, and it is not rare that somebody steps into the UFC and drops their first 1 or 2 fights before they find their groove and they really start meshing and moving forward well. Krzysztof Jotko, on the other hand, looked like he was headed for a title shot. He came in and was knocking heads around and really was on a rocket ship on his way up the division until he ran into a couple of power punchers and got his ass knocked out. He was riding a 4-fight win streak when he ran into David Branch. Now, he dropped a split decision loss to David Branch, and that was back in 2017, where David Branch was not quite the shell of David Branch that we see today. So not really a huge shame in that. Then he gets matched up with Uriah Hall, and you all know all about Uriah Hall. We've been on Uriah Hall a couple of times, and he basically controlled that fight from bell to bell until Uriah Hall found that knockout blast punch in round 2. Not a whole lot of shame in that loss either. He looked really, really good up until the point that he got caught. The fight that I have an issue with is Brad Tavares. After he dropped the loss to Uriah Hall, they matched him up against Brad Tavares, and it was another one where he looked pretty decent, but it was a good scrambly back and forth kind of fight. But you know what happened? He got clipped in round 3 and dropped by Brad Tavares. And this is what scares me here. You know who Brad Tavares knocks out? Nobody. Brad Tavares has never won a UFC fight by knockout. He has not won a UFC fight by any form of punching since he fought Phil frickin' Baroni back in 2011. And I apologize. That was a UFC fight. So he does have one UFC fight win by knockout. But it was Phil freaking Baroni back in 2011. He hasn't knocked out anybody, but he hit Jotko hard enough to hurt him and knock him out. This is a spot where I'm very, very concerned that Uriah Hall broke Krzysztof Jotko. Now, it's a difficult fight to pick. Because Marc-Andre Barriault, I'm pretty high on this guy. He's got solid KO power. He's got decent takedown attempts, strong grappling advances, strong wrestling. His takedown defense is a little bit of a problem. He slips good and he comes back with huge counter shots. He attacks the body well and he has big ground and pound. He does struggle in the grappling department though. He has a hard time getting up from under guys. Now, Jotko, one of my favorite things about him is he's got a giant Vegeta tattoo on his arm. Now, you guys that follow me on Twitter know I'm a DBZ fan, and Vegeta's my favorite character, so I automatically have to cheer for Jotko at least a little bit because he's rocking the Vegeta tattoo on his left shoulder. He controls space really, really well. He gets in and out really, really well, which is actually something that Barriault does too. Jotko's tall, and he's rangy, and he's got excellent timing. Now, if you do get him to the ground, he's got an excellent ability to get back up. He's got really good cage control, so when he gets his back pressed up against the cage, he exits and skates off really, really well. It almost looks easy when he does it. Jotko's got solid knockout power. He's got it in both of his hands. He actually has KO power in his kicks as well. And recently, in his last couple fights, even though they haven't looked phenomenal, he's got really improved takedowns. He has also brutal ground and pound if he gets it down there. So it's a crossroads fight. Like I said, one guy's stock is dropping down and the other guy's stock is rising. Even though he dropped his UFC debut, I think that there's a bright future for Marc-Andre Barriault. And I'm not sure what the UFC is doing here. We've talked before about trying to be on the same side as the promotion and trying to figure out what they're doing. I don't know if Marc-Andre coming in and losing to Sanchez is them trying to set Jotko up with another fight that can easily get him back on track, or if they're seeing a weakened Jotko and they're trying to give Marc-Andre a decent name that he can come up against because they feel like he's ready for the challenge. It's a phenomenal match. They did a good job matching this one up, but I'm not sure what the end goal here is. Jotko opened up as a minus 190 favorite, and Marc-Andre Barriault on the comeback was plus 165. 52% of the money has come in on Jotko. However, we have a reverse line movement situation here, ladies and gentlemen. Less money has come in on Marc-Andre Barriault. However, that line is closing. Jotko is now only a minus 160, minus 165 favorite, and you can get plus 140 or plus 145 on Marc-Andre Barriault. You can get plus 147 over at Pinnacle. And I don't know what to do on this fight. Like I said, I'm really high on Barriault, and I wanted to come in here and tell you that we're betting Barriault. I wanted to take the underdog stab there, but I'm really concerned with what Jotko is able to do. He trains out of ATT. He's got a really, really good gym behind him. He's training with guys like Thiago, Alves, a lot of fighters that he posts on Twitter all the time. He's almost like a fan. He does these selfies with like really big name fighters and like he points at him and smiles and stuff like he's one of us when we go to a convention or something like that. So he's working with really solid fighters. They know how to grapple. They know how to improve. They know how to keep these guys with their heads in the games. Barriault's on the upswing, and he is fighting out of Canada, and I did see online that he's actually done some time over at TriStar, which to me tells me he's aware of the hole in his grappling. He learned his lesson from the Andrew Sanchez fight, and if he can make this thing a standing war, I'm worried Jotko's chin is broken. You know what? This is a fly by the seat of my pants moment here. You guys caught me with my pants down. I was going to pass. I was going to pass on this fight. I was going to tell you that it's too close to call. I know a lot of people who are really, really high on Jotko, and this is kind of a buy low spot on Jotko because of the skill set that he has, because of the skill set that he brings to the table, and they really think that this is going to be a bounce back spot for him. But like I said, I'm concerned that his chin has been broken. If a guy like Brad Tavares can hit you and hurt you, then a guy like Barriault is going to bury you. And I didn't mean that as... that was a pretty good pun. If I spelled it Barriault, bury you. That would be good. If I was writing an article on this fight, I would totally use that. Oh, man. Now that I'm looking at this, I think there's value to be had on Barriault. I think the reverse line movement really is going to... It sets it home for me. The fact that the sharp money, the money that the bookies respect is coming in on Barriault, that just kind of confirms what I've been thinking on this fight. And I really think that Barriault is live here as an underdog. I will be taking him at plus 147. We're going to roll with the dog. Let's go, Marc-Andre Barriault. Can't help myself. Got to do it. All right, next up, we are headed back down in weight. We're going to go to the UFC's premier division, the 155-pound lightweight division, where OAM Olivier Aubin-Mercier is taking on Arman Tsarukyan. And OAM is the hometown Canadian here. Oh, and that's one thing I forgot to mention in our last fight, by the way. Marc-Andre Barriault is the hometown Canadian, so you damn well better guess that if that fight is going to be close, Marc-Andre is going to get the nod. So sorry, dipping back to that for a quick second. That helps our decision. So OAM versus Arman Tsarukyan. OAM is very, very well known for his solid grappling. He's got really good get-up game. He's got good cage work. He's actually got a judo background, so he's got really, really strong, powerful hips, which helps when it comes to the grappling game, elevating his opponents, passing guard, maintaining guard, things like that. Good hips basically get you everywhere in MMA. Now, he has good, solid forward pressure, but he doesn't really have knockout power. He's kind of got a case of pillow fists. He will hit people in the face all day, and they ain't going anywhere. Now, it'll set up the takedowns and help him scramble and get them to the mat, but that's about it. He's 11-4-0, and he's kind of on a bit of a skid. Honestly, I think he's almost degrading at this point. I have not been very impressed with him, and it seems like everyone's really figured him out. He's been out-wrestled in his last couple fights, and even though he did get a KO win over Evan Dunham, that's the retiring Evan Dunham, not really all that impressive to get a guy like that out of there, because he was checked out, beaten up, and done. So Arman Tsarukyan, on the other hand, this is only going to be his second UFC fight. He made his UFC debut against Islam Makhachev, which, holy shit, we talk a couple times about making your UFC debut against tough competition, but Islam Makhachev is like the mother of all UFC debuts. The dude's an absolute beast. And Arman really came in and had a solid showing. He's very, very physically strong and powerful. That was a Russian-on-Russian war. He's 13-2-0. He's got excellent grappling and wrestling. He's got fantastic balance. He actually he was able to pressure Islam up against the cage and had really, really good cage work in that fight. And he has amazing escapes from bottom. He's strong enough. He literally stood up with Islam Makhachev on him. He wrapped one arm around a leg and was like, nah, I'm just going to stand up. And that's not something that you do, especially with a grappler the caliber of Islam Makhachev. That was insanely impressive to me and speaks to just how physically strong this guy is. He's got great kicks. He uses them very, very well tied in with his striking, and he's got a really solid chin. He takes a hell of a beating, and he just keeps plowing forward. He also trains at Tiger Muay Thai, so even though we talk about his grappling all kinds here, he's really solid in the striking department too. I am all in on Arman Tsarukyan. I think that his showing at the beginning, when he first came on the scene, his showing was phenomenal, something to behold. And here's where I'm confused. Arman Tsarukyan opened up as a minus 255 favorite, and I feel like that's appropriate. 50% of the money has come in on Arman Tsarukyan. There's a reverse line movement situation going on here, which gives me the heebie-jeebies. And Olivier Aubin-Mercier has taken less money, but that line is crashing. He was a plus 215 underdog, and he's all the way down to plus 270. I'm sorry, plus 170. Wow, I keep doing that tonight. He's all the way down to plus 170. And I do not understand this. I am going to say a big thank you here. We're going to implement our strategy where we take a couple of people where the lines may be a little inflated, but we just think they get it done, and we're going to parlay them together. Remember when we talked about Viviane Araujo? Yep, we are going to close that parlay with Arman Tsarukyan. If you go strength for strength, these two are both grapplers. If you go not quite strength to not quite strength, Arman Tsarukyan is going to be the better striker of the two. He's got knockout power, and he's far more technical on the feet. I do not think Olivier Aubin-Mercier is strong enough to handle the grappling game of Arman Tsarukyan, and there's no way Arman's getting submitted by OAM. So OAM may be flashy. He may have some crazy reversals. Arman's got the wrestling and the physical power to stop those things from happening. I think he is going to grind out OAM, and he might even take TKO him and get him out of there. We're going to close that parlay. That gives us plus 111. That's right. We're going to parlay two nice big juicy favorites, minus 253 for Araujo, minus 194 for Tsarukyan, and that gives us just better than plus 110. We're going to risk one unit, lower our risk-reward ratio yet again on two favorites that we just think get it done, and try and win ourselves a cheap unit here. The next fight may be my favorite fight on the entire card. We've got Geoff Neal facing Niko Price. Now, Geoff is 11-2-0, where Niko Price is 13-2-0, and this is an awesome bit of matchmaking. Now, Neal is an incredibly talented brawler who's still really like getting developing here. He did fight on the Tuesday Night Contender Series, and he's had 3 UFC fights with really a decent level of competition. Brian Camozzi, not so much. Frank Camacho, that's decent. And then Bilal Muhammad. So he's done really, really well so far in his run in the UFC. Niko Price is coming in here, and he has had a bit of an up and down type of run in the UFC, but I think he's run into similar level opponents who are all headed for the top of the division. I think that's kind of why he stuttered a little bit. He got choked out by Vicente Luque, but we all know the name of Vicente Luque. He's an absolute monster, and he is on a rocket ship towards a title shot, with his only loss coming to Leon Edwards. Now, he also ran into Abdul Razak Al Hassan, who's another crazy power puncher type of kid, and he unfortunately got clipped and knocked out there. But he fought George Sullivan, Randy Brown, and Tim Means, and he choked out George Sullivan, KO'd Randy Brown from the bottom, and then KO'd Tim Means stiff. I mean, those are really, really dynamic, impressive wins. So yes, he got beat, and he got handled by 2 guys that were definitely very talented finishers, but he turned around and he finished guys who are really good and notoriously hard to finish. The other thing about Niko Price that people don't really know about is he had an undefeated 9-fight amateur career. So he actually has a lot more experience than we're giving him credit for necessarily by looking at his record. He fires off 9.2 significant strikes per minute. Neal, on the flip side of things, he's knocked down 4 of his last opponents. He's got 5 knockdowns in his last 4 fights. He manages a whopping 13.4 significant strikes per minute. So both of these guys basically are willing to step into the fire. Now, the big thing here is that Neal's sporting a 91% takedown defense. So it's really, really hard to get this guy to the ground. Niko Price has a very, very aggressive and opportunistic submission game. And that's something that we saw against Randy Brown, where he got him all tangled up and rolled up, and you think Randy Brown's going to have the advantage being on top, and Niko hit him with a freaking hammer fist from the bottom, which to this day blows my mind that he got away with, but put Randy Brown out cold with that shot. Niko can essentially finish this fight from everywhere. Now, I know Neal he's really impressive. He's really solid. He's got good, crisp striking. He fights out of Fortis MMA, so he's got a good camp behind him. He's solid. I don't really like the idea of stepping in front of Neal, but I can't not take this price on Niko Price. And that, again, I'm sorry, not a bad pun. Didn't mean it that way. I went ahead and fired out a tweet on this one because I honestly thought that this line was wide. And I thought that other people would agree with me that this line is wide. But once again, I was wrong. I botched the line movement. I am not an expert when it comes to line movements in mixed martial arts. So I locked up a price, and because of that, I'm going to stick to my guns because that's what I do. I have integrity, and I'm going to roll with Niko Price at plus 235. Luckily for all of you listening to this podcast, you can get a much juicier line on Niko Price at this point. He's all the way up to plus 280 at 5 dimes, which I think is crazy. You're telling me that line is, I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. People are massively disrespecting my boy, Niko Price. I don't understand. See, this is one where Niko Price is a kill or be killed fighter. He's the kind of underdog that you want to bet. He will be fighting for every single penny that you put on him all the time. And that's something that I always want when I bet on, especially a big underdog like this. He will never stop coming until he is unconscious. Now, can Neal put him out and make him unconscious? Yeah, he absolutely could. But do I think it's going to be something that's easy? No, absolutely not. And at this odds, I mean, plus 280, you're telling me that he's got a 26% probability of winning the fight? That's wrong. That's so wrong. Nico Price is such a dangerous finisher. He's the kind of guy who tips the scales. He is the kind of guy who says, he just has the skill set that can overcome that kind of a gap, is what I guess I'm trying to say. If it goes to the ground, you're not safe. If it's on the feet and you're a more technical fighter, you are still not safe. He will find a way to win, and that's what he does. That's exactly the kind of dog that I want to bet on, and I will be betting on him here. That is my big zip nuts on the table play for the weekend. He's my big underdog. He's my big score. We're going to bet Nico Price, and I got him at plus 235. Congratulations to all of you who can get him at a much better dog price. We have finally arrived. We are here. This is the co-main event of the evening, the women's featherweight 145-pound division, where former queen Cris Cyborg is looking to get back on track after being knocked out stiff and having her belt taken by the great Amanda Nunes. This is her first fight back since getting knocked out in 50 freaking seconds, and she's taking on 7-0 Felicia Spencer. Felicia the Phenom Spencer, and that is spelled F-E-E-N-O-M, and I hate it. I don't know what you're going for there, but this ain't it. I don't like it. Sorry. I know maybe you're trying to be goofy or funny. I hate it. Felicia Spencer is taking a massive step up in competition here. She made her UFC debut just a couple months ago, and she defeated Megan Anderson by rear naked choke in the very first round. Megan Anderson was the girl who was brought in to take out Cris Cyborg. Megan Anderson was the future. She was the fighter that the UFC was going to get behind, and they were ready to throw her into the deep end because she was going to be the one to get it done where nobody else could. And boy, did that get ended in a hurry. Spencer did her thing. That was an absolute mauling. She's got good, solid forward pressure. She's big and strong for the division, and that's something that you don't see a whole lot. 145 is so limited. There's not a whole lot of women at 145, and that's why they had such a hard time finding challengers for Cyborg. She was such a big, crazy, intimidating fighter. They would bring women from the smaller divisions and have them step up a weight class to challenge Cyborg, and then basically eat that loss before they were allowed to cut down to the next weight class because they just needed people to fight her. But Spencer is a legitimate 145er. She's big, she's thick, she is strong, and she has really good grappling. She's got chain wrestling, good forward pressure. She's got really good ground and pound, and she's young and improving. One of the best things I saw from her was her back control. She got on Megan Anderson, and where a lot of people would have fallen off, I mean, multiple times, Megan tried to shake her, and she got into spots where she was going to really look like she was just going to take a dive and slip right off her and be in a bad spot. She adjusted. She worked her way back up. She used her hooks really well, and she stayed on the back. She was able to drag Megan around and never, ever got off her. She stuck like glue. Now, here's the thing. Cyborg was the queen of women's MMA for a long time for a very valid reason. She's a legitimate Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. She is insanely powerful and strong. And I don't need to tell most of you, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know who Cris Cyborg is. She knocks everybody out, with Amanda Nunes basically being the only exception to that rule. And I guess Holly Holm, who she went to a 5-round decision with. But she's been around forever, and she's 34 years old. So here's where the question comes into play. Felicia Spencer's 28 years old, and did Amanda Nunes shove Cyborg off a cliff? She's an incredible fighter. She's one of the best women's fighters ever in the sport, but here's where she's reaching the end of her prime. She's 34 years old, and I think women exit their prime around this area, 34 to 37, somewhere in that ballpark, especially their fighting prime. And someone like Cyborg, who's been doing it for years and years and had the issue with performance-enhancing drugs, all that kind of stuff, it takes a toll on your body. And even though she's been so dominant, is this the time? Is it finally over? Or is she going to come back and show this young girl that you do not step into my home, and she's going to work her way back to her belt? I hate this line. It's minus 600 for Cyborg. Most of the money has come in on Spencer, and she's sitting around plus 450. You can get her at plus 500 in a couple of spots. There's really some disagreement in this line. I think There's some people who think that Cyborg's done, and then other people who are taking advantage of the opportunity to kind of buy low, which I know it's ridiculous to say that minus 600 is buying low, but Cyborg is usually the minus 900 favorite on the card. She's sitting at minus 800 at Bookmaker, but she's minus 600 at 5 dimes. That's a big gap. You can get plus 450 to plus 500 on Felicia Spencer. And unfortunately, I just think I've got to pass. I would love to tell you to take Felicia Spencer. And I actually came in thinking that I might do that. But we've actually put a lot of plays already on this card, and especially after the way last week went, I don't want to be in the same situation where we get to the end of the card and we're close and potentially have locked up a good night because I like the picks that we've made to this point. And then we have like a Hail Mary 1 unit on Felicia Spencer to cash in on this big juicy plus 500. I mean, she could get it done. We've seen Cyborg controlled and in some bad positions in her last couple fights. There is no doubt in my mind that Cyborg is slipping. She got controlled up against the fence against both Holly Holm and Yana Kunitskaya. Tanya Evinger, she had some success on the feet with her before that third round knockout. But Cyborg has that wily veteran savvy that she can just manage to defend it and get it back into her realm, and then she's still got that brutal power. Felicia Spencer, she's not great on the feet. You watch all the UFC promo stuff, she talks about how underrated her striking is and stuff like that. Don't believe that. She's not good on the feet. Now watch after I say that, she's going to come out and clip Cyborg and knock her out. But she looked really sloppy. She looked really, really sloppy on the feet against Megan Anderson. I do not think she can stand toe-to-toe with Cyborg and last long at all. Now, her chain grappling, if she gets a good position on Cyborg, where other women like Holly Holm and Yana Kunitskaya could not get a finish, she is dangerous enough to lock up a submission and get that finish. If you want to sprinkle it, I wouldn't blame you. I'm a big enough degenerate that I might even take a sprinkle on it myself, maybe a half unit to win 2.5 or something like that, but I'm not going to make an official pick here, simply because Cyborg's the queen. And if she is reinvigorated from that loss, coming back hungry to get her belt back, coming back to get on track, it's the first time she's lost in something crazy like 20 fights. I don't want to step in front of that runaway freight train. And Felicia Spencer is way too green, especially in the striking area, for me to feel comfortable taking her. As a one-dimensional fighter coming in to face a very well-rounded monster like Cyborg, I don't know if she gets it done. She's got the opportunity to, she's got the chance to, she's got the skill set that might be able to throw a wrench in Cyborg's plan. But my gut says Cyborg gets this thing done as soon as she defends a takedown or two. So let's move on. We are headed straight to the main event of the evening. Max Holloway versus Frankie the Answer Edgar. Max Holloway is 24-0. Edgar is 23-6-1. And let me first just say that I am such a big fan of both of these guys. It's one of those ones where it's going to be really tough for me to watch, because if you're kind of a fan of one guy but a fan of the other guy, it's no big deal to see somebody face down on the canvas. But when you really love both fighters, knowing that one of them is gonna lose and there's nothing to stop it from happening, it really puts a dampener on it. So I'm just gonna try and watch this one through the lens of a fresh, doe-eyed fan here so I don't get hurt. Frankie has had an absolutely storied career, and it could take me an entire podcast to just tell you how awesome Frankie is and all the things that he has done. He currently holds the record for fight time in the UFC's octagon, 6 hours, 47 minutes, and 33 seconds. He is closing in on 7 hours of cage time, legitimate fight cage time, not training, fight cage time. That is ridiculous. And then you've got Max Holloway on the other side of things, who is the UFC's leader in significant strikes. These guys are both legitimate Hall of Famers. If they're not already, they will be. And they both hold records that are going to be very, very difficult for anybody to break in the future. Frankie Edgar is a short little tank, and he's got incredible wrestling, incredible forward pressure. Just when you think he's done, he shows up and he wrecks people. He has a decision win over Jeremy Stephens, which was impressive for him to get through that, because we know how hard Stephens hits. And then he got paired up with Yair Rodriguez, and he derailed that hype train by big brothering the shit out of him for 2 full rounds and beating the hell out of him on the ground where he was out of his comfort zone in the striking realm. But then he came back against Brian Ortega, and he got murdered in round 1. Vicious shot that he took from Brian Ortega. But he rebounded really well against Cub Swanson. So here's the thing. Frankie may have taken more damage than any current fighter I've ever seen. His wars with Gray Maynard back at 155, I don't know how he's still standing and talking straight. He's 37 years old, so he's getting very close to that 40-year-old cutoff point that we always talk about. And the wars just have to be taking a toll on him. He does have knockout power. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so he's a dangerous submission threat on the ground. And his wrestling is second to none. He can win this fight in a lot of ways. Holloway, on the flip side, has just as many strengths going his way. He's massive at 145. He's so tall. We always talk about how being tall is a disadvantage when it comes to wrestling, but Holloway has this insane 93% takedown defense rate. So even though he's tall, he just doesn't give up takedowns. The flip side of that is he never goes for takedowns. So they're not really going to get any type of scrambly positions where they're fighting over that, because Holloway is never going to try to tank Frankie Edgar down. I promise you, Holloway is not going to shoot for a takedown. Frankie's going to have a hard time trying to reach Holloway's chin. Holloway's got really good defensive striking. I mean, I know he ate a lot of shots against Dustin Poirier, and a lot of people are arguing that he might have been broken by Dustin Poirier, and they're worried about how he's going to come back. He's got that thick Hawaiian head, man. Even though Poirier busted his face up, Max walked through every single thing that Poirier threw at him. He was fine. I promise you he's going to come back and be just fine. He's a young kid. He's 27 years old. He's not technically even in his fighting prime yet, which is right around that 29-30 range. So he's really coming into his own, and he's already the champion. The sky is the limit for a guy like Max Holloway. I don't see how Frankie Edgar wins this fight. I think that Frankie Edgar is very, very similar to a guy like Jose Aldo. And even though they've got different ways that they use their skill sets, they've got similar body types. They both are good grapplers. They both are good strikers. They're very quick. They're fast. Frankie gets rocked in like every single fight. He gets hurt every single time he gets into the cage. But most people he's able to wrestle to like create that break, to create that space and get his head back around him. Max Holloway's not going to let him off. If Max Holloway clips Frankie on the jaw and he sees Frankie wobble, his whole thing is volume. He will unload. And with his stunning, stellar 93% takedown defense rate, I don't know that Frankie's going to be able to get that life-saving takedown. And I think Max Holloway goes to town on his chin. If Frankie does manage to get Max Holloway down, Max has an incredibly underrated ground game. It's underrated because we never see it. I guarantee you he is incredible once he gets on the ground, and I don't know that Frankie Edgar is going to be able to hold him there if he can even get him to the ground. I'll be very curious to see if Frankie can get him there once or twice, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'll bet you Max Holloway keeps his takedown defense intact, or if he hits the ground, he's going to pop right back up, and then he's going to touch Frankie's jaw. The props are not out yet. I'm going to look for Max Holloway by KO. I think that Max Holloway is safe to use as an anchor for your parlays if you want to do a 3-teamer or something like that. Now, be careful. I want to do a little PSA here on parlays. I've got a friend, a guy I've been talking to on Twitter, a new fan of the show, who mentioned doing a lot of parlays last week. Parlays are the devil's fruit, folks, in MMA. Parlays are very, very difficult to pull off because so many things can go wrong in mixed martial arts. So many things can happen once you're in there. People can get hurt. People can slip on a banana peel. A lot can go wrong to bust your parlay. So do not bank on parlays. Use them as long shot lottery tickets, or like we do to bring the price down on favorites, but no more than 2 or 3 fighters. If you get above that, you're just asking for trouble. Somebody's gonna bust your parlay. I do think Max Holloway can be used as an anchor in those kind of parlays in this case, though, because I just don't see it. If you want to take a flyer on Frankie Edgar, more power to you. He's sitting around plus 325 right now, and I just don't think that's enough. And unfortunately, the line is too wide. I'm not playing max straight at minus 400. I also like our parlay the way it is, getting us even money. We would only go from, the parlay we've got with Araujo and Tsarukyan, if we threw max in there, it'd get us from plus 111 to plus 160, something like that. Just not worth the extra squeeze in case someone who is an absolute legend like Frankie decides to show up and put on the best performance of his career. So I know it's a bit of a bummer, but we will be passing on both the main and the co-main event. Keep an eye out on my Twitter. I might tweet out some props. I might tweet out some totals, other things I'm interested in. And hopefully this week we've got enough totals that I can get back on track with a degenerate parlay, because it's been a couple weeks since we did one of those. Woo! That is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for sticking with me. Let's recap those picks. We are going to rock with the big man Lemos to just beast his way to a win with underdog odds at plus 154. We're going to ride with Erik Koch, hoping he finds a win at his new weight class where he's filled out and will show us some new wrinkles at even money. We're going to roll with GILLIAN Robertson. She's going to be the stronger fighter. She's going to be the better grappler at minus 130. We're going to ride with Pantoja to keep this train rolling and outclass Figueiredo for a full 3 rounds. We're going to go with the hometown kid Marc-Andre Barriault at plus 147 to finish the wounded Krzysztof Jotko. We're going to close our night out with a parlay. Viviane Araujo and Arman Tsarukyan, our 2 favorites, to give us a parlay at plus 111. The night will close with Nico Price, our big dog, at plus 235. A dangerous finisher who can get it done from anywhere. Thank you all for the love. Hit me up, give me a follow, subscribe, share the show with your friends. Let's make that cash. Let's roll.